votes. And we have enough
Heart of the city.
voting power to change anything that needs to be changed.
Politics, progress, game boards, objects viewed like pawns till we change up our mindset. Value of the dollars at the center of this conflict, where lives only matter if they serve to make a profit. But if a midget sees further on the shoulders of the giant, then we should see further than the tyrant and build a future within alliance with success is our science in the quest to go higher. It's the heart of the city. Wake up, world. You are watching the Heart of the City. Welcome to another online show. I am so excited. I'm your host, Malik Boyd. I hope that wherever you are, you're in good spirits and all is truly well. We have an action-packed show today. This week on HeartCity, we explore opportunity zones. Now, many of you know these are federal programs designed to impact local areas. We'll discuss the impact on cities and communities, and how through these projects, participants are able to provide a second chance for some. HUD Regional Director DeFelice will join us to talk about that. Now, with local politics as a focus, we head to Philadelphia with Councilwoman Kendra Brooks to discuss recent city council sessions and legislation. North Carolina has an exciting district race for House of Representatives. You'll hear from one of the candidates. And also, an executive director of a reentry program joins us to discuss his program and how it's working to make a difference for returning citizens. All that and more is up ahead. But as you know, we always start the show off in prayer. To that end, I am so excited to have with us Pastor Michael Steele Sr., family pastor at New Life Baptist Church in Concord, North Carolina. Welcome home, Pastor.
Good afternoon. I hope you're doing well today.
I am good. I'm on this side of the grave, as some of the seasoned saints would say. So that's half the battle. You know the issue of the day, man. Whether it be Concord, Philadelphia, Chicago, Dallas, no matter what city, municipality you pick, there are issues.
Absolutely.
There are challenges that we still face, whether it be education funding and ensuring that inner city schools get the resources they need, all the way down to issues of violence, economic impact in our communities. I know commercial corridors here up in the Northeastern corridor are challenged, and they were challenged long before COVID ever hit, making sure that minority businesses get what they need. All of those things tend to be not just on legislator shoulders, but on our leaders within the community of which you are one. And you deal with inside, behind the door issues that happen with our families that never make the news. And so with all that you know, with all that you've experienced, I'm going to ask you to lead us into our 2-minute prayer for the city.
Let us pray. Lord, we thank you once again for this opportunity to be here again with Heart of the City. Lord, we're asking you to show yourself strong. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your mercy. Thank you for your peace. You are an awesome God, and we love you for being who you are. Thank you for being the head of our lives. And Lord, right now we bring before you our cities, asking you, Lord, to have your will and your way. Lord, there's some things that are going on that we face daily, we face hourly, we face weekly, we face monthly, wherever we may be, whatever we may do. Lord, there are some things that we face that make us uncomfortable. And in those areas where we are most uncomfortable, Lord, help us to realize that there is room for growth. Help us to understand, Lord, that we never have a testimony without a test. Lord, we can never have a message without a mess. And Lord, I pray right now that you would help my brothers, you would help my sisters, wherever they might be, Lord. Let them see your power. Let them feel your presence. Let them hear from you, as you say in your word, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all our hearts. Lean not into our own understanding, and in all our ways acknowledge you, and you will direct our paths. Lord, help us to acknowledge you in everything that we do. Help us to always be in a constant state of prayer, asking you to help us to be who you called us to be and to grow and do in the things that you called us to do. Lord, we cannot function, we cannot move, we cannot breathe without you. And Lord, I pray right now that you would let this hour be a blessing to everyone who is tuned in and the times that go before us. Have your will and your way. It is in Jesus the Christ's name we pray. Amen and amen.
Amen. Pastor Steele, thank you so much for covering the viewership in prayer. Tell those who are watching the program right now how they can worship and fellowship with you.
We would love to have you to join us. We are on Facebook every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. and every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. at New Life Concord. You can find us there. Also, if you are not a Facebook fan or a social media fan, you can go to our church website. That is newlifeconcord.org, newlifeconcord.org, and you can log on and you can find our services live right there as well.
So, viewer audience, please, by all means, make sure you check out New Life and the family in Concord, North Carolina. I am sure that is a worship experience that you do not want to miss. Now, Pastor Steele, I also heard that you serve you didn't just serve us as a pastor, but you also wore the shield as well and spent many years in law enforcement. With all that's going on around the country, what are some of your words of wisdom to our community as we press forward for legislation that makes sense for our young people and that makes sense for us as a community? We recognize recent judgments were passed for Breonna Taylor and still have pending cases going on. But overall, there's a conversation that we need to have. From your vantage point, what would be some of those areas of focus?
So I would say from the non-law enforcement perspective, if you're not a law enforcement officer and you're looking at law enforcement, I would say, please understand that law enforcement officers are people. Law enforcement officers have families. Law enforcement officers have children. They are somebody's son. They're somebody's daughter. They're somebody's brother or sister, uncle or auntie. Just understand that they are real people. But with that being said, just know that law enforcement officers are not perfect. They're not perfect. They're going to make mistakes. And just like any other profession, doctors have malpractice insurance for a reason. Every profession carries a level of insurance. And, typically we hold our officers to a higher standard. And I believe that every officer should be held to that higher standard, but understanding that they are imperfect individuals. And sometimes they make mistakes, probably more than one. And so I would encourage you to be a little patient, as right now it's really a tough time to be an officer. And, the reality is that, we all make mistakes. And so, from the perspective of an officer, the officers have to be patient with the people as well. And knowing that, just because somebody has on this suit that's called our black or our brown skin, we cannot change that. We cannot take that off. And so sometimes our skin is weaponized. And so I just encourage officers to take a second look, if you have to realize that just because somebody has black or brown skin, it doesn't mean that they're guilty. It means that they deserve to have justice and not just us. So that's just my quick perspective. It's challenging to see everything that's going on around us. And, although I have many friends that wear the uniform still, they would have literally died for me. I respect the job. I respect the everything that has to happen in law enforcement. But at the same time, I think law enforcement needs to take a step back and then reassess what's going on around us and do our best to be as best as we can, those of us that are walking behind the badge.
I think some of your words are spot on. I think in this conversation, it's not only nuanced, but we have to be very pragmatic about the dialogue and how we move forward in that space. I am so thankful that you covered us in prayer today. I'm going to do my part to pray God's continued increase on your life and the life of the ministry as well.
Amen. Likewise, we'll be praying for you all. Thank you.
We appreciate you. And so we are now covered in prayer. I'm headed to a break on the other side. The regional director for Region 3 for HUD, a major part of the administration in our government that is doing some very, very interesting things around opportunity zones. You're going to hear more about that, what it is exactly. Obviously, it's been a buzzword among some of our economic circles. You're going to hear not only the bones of the program, but you're going to see in real time some of the action that occurs when these programs are done correctly. I'm headed to the break. On the other side, Joe DeFelice, you are watching the Heart of the City. We'll be right back.
Hey man, I really appreciate that Patrick Price on my insurance, Jake from State Farm. Being a champ has its perks.
Here's the deal, Patrick. State Farm offers everyone surprisingly great rates.
Let me repay the favor with some field passes, come on.
No favors, just great rates.
Okay, fine. I'll let you wear the ring, but only for a day.
When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
If I could do one thing, I'd make sure that there were more textbooks in schools. I'm a teacher. I've seen the need. But my girlfriend here likes to say,
don't just talk about it, be about it.
And we're about the 2020 census.
Because when everyone gets counted on the census, it helps inform public funding in our neighborhood for the next 10 years.
So don't just talk about it.
Be about it.
Complete the census online, by phone, or by mail. Shape your future. Start here at 2020census.gov.
We are back. You're watching the Heart of the City. Thank you for tuning in today. For those who are just following us, make sure you check us out on YouTube. Click the like, share, and subscribe button. Now, opportunity zones are a buzzword now in the electoral climate, but then also around our communities. You hear it in various phases of redevelopment of urban areas. And now we are bringing to you some of the individuals who work on a direct basis to make sure that not only you know what's happening in the space with opportunity zones, but that you're able to maximize it as well. Joe DeFelice, he is the regional administrator for HUD Region 3. He also serves as the Assistant Deputy Secretary for the Office of Field Policy and Management. Joe DeFelice, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Malik, thanks for having me. I hope I sound okay. I'm literally on the side of a road here between Delaware and Maryland on my way back from a groundbreaking. So I try to squeeze you in. So.
Nah, I appreciate it. So let's get right to it. Opportunity zones. Many hear that word or that phrase, but they don't necessarily understand what the facets and tenets of the program are. Can you give a brief breakdown on what opportunity zones are?
Yeah, I'll run you through real quick. Essentially, opportunity zones came out of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act 2017. What essentially says in a nutshell is if you have capital gains, rather than cutting a check for the tax to Washington, so make $1 million, 20% of that, you got to send $200,000 check to Washington, reinvest that money in these designated opportunity zones. There's 300 across Pennsylvania, but there's 83 in the city of Philadelphia. So you could take that money and invest in the city of Philadelphia. What are the benefits for the investor? The benefits for the investor are they get a 10-year deferment on paying that tax. So money grows over time to begin with. They get a 10% cut in their tax. So if they were going to pay $200,000, they now only have to pay, they get 20%, they'll get $20,000 also. They got to pay $180,000. And any money they make on top of that through the sell of the property after 10 years becomes tax free.
So we literally just lost a little bit.
Driving private dollars into communities where private developers weren't putting money before. You're losing me?
We're losing you just a little bit.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So essentially, that's how the money breaks down. Okay, on the flip side of that, there's 217 federal grants which are prioritized towards opportunity zones. So that's the HUD alone has like 50 federal grants prioritized towards opportunity zones, one of which is a Choice Neighborhood Implementation Grant. You may or not know, we just put $30 million into Sharswood, Blumberg. That's generating opportunity zones work.
That's interesting. And Wilmington as well just experienced some impact through opportunity zones. Second Chance Farms, many of us have heard of that concept and what has gone on. And I hear that there's also a commitment for them to move to Philadelphia. Talk about what happened through the opportunity zones and what you were able to do with Second Chance Farms.
So the way that opportunity zones work, right? So these are supposed to go into communities to create jobs and create. A lot of them have been invested into real estate. Second Chances Farm took a little bit of a different approach and invested in a business. They did invest in the real estate, but they invested in the business. And what they did was they hired only ex-offenders, pay them a salary of $31,000 a year. People come out of prison directly into Second Chances Farm, making $31,000 a year. It's really taking the first step back at an opportunity. People coming out of jail in the opportunity zones, now they have an opportunity. We had Khalif Ringgold there 2 days ago. We had Secretary Carson and Attorney General Barr in Wilmington, Delaware, talking about OZs. And Khalif Ringgold said, listen, if it wasn't for this, my friend got killed today. I'd have been with him. But I'm here today with you all because of this opportunity. The beauty of this program is it's not even a program, it's a tax incentive. The beauty of it is it's really taken private investors to have a for-profit solution to a nonprofit problem. That's what Second Chances talks about. They just signed an agreement, a memorandum of understanding to put their Philadelphia headquarters at 10th and Norris. And the plan is to expand this Second Chances Farm using only opportunity zone dollars throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in the distressed communities.
Wow. So how, and this has been a challenge for many. They hear about opportunity zones. They understand.
Am I breaking up all over the place, or you got me? Am I
all right? We got it. But here's the big challenge. Many local community leaders and businesses want to get involved in opportunity zones. They want to understand how their businesses can actually get an ROI or play a role in opportunity zones. How does that happen? Because in many cases, oftentimes with programs in previous administrations, we've seen big sweeping dollars come into the community, but developers that were at a specific, whether it be financial level cachet or political cachet, be able to capitalize, and local community has not. What are some of the ways that local business can get involved?
Very simple. When I had Scott Turner in the White House, the executive director of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, we met with some state representatives and some local officials in West Philly. And his advice to them was to get in the room, be at the table. It's not so much sitting by hoping developers do the right thing and don't gentrify. It's the idea that you can start your own fund. Anyone can start their own fund. Start your own community development organizations, civic associations, nonprofits, faith-based organizations. Start their own fund and be the driver. And then you go out and you solicit the dollars that go into the fund, and then you're spearheading the project. The one I'm looking at right now is the Healthy Neighborhoods, Tioga, just north of the North Central District. They're soliciting funds right now to put a healthy living environment just west of the North District Station. That's the idea of taking this approach from the bottom up. Look, I'm from the city. A little bit differently. I'm from the Northeast, but I started my own community. I was involved with my own community development corporation. You need those local leaders that have a vision for their community, that they can go out and find those people to invest. Who are the people that are going to invest? There's a lot of important people that came out of North Philly. They're the best kind. You go to them and you say, hey, do you want to send a check to Washington, D.C. and not know where it goes? Or do you want to have that money have an impact here in your community today? Billy Blanks, for example. People might not know Billy Blanks. Billy Blanks was involved with Ty Bo, the Ty Bo videos of the early 2000s. We were in Erie with Billy Blanks a year ago. He had no idea about opportunity zones. He came to an event with us. He goes, I didn't know I can do this. I have capital gains dollars. I'm investing today. And when I was down in Newport News, I talked about, hey, Allen Iverson, Michael Vick, people come from this community to have those. Give them a way to give back to their community. They can make dollars, but have that social impact. But you really need that community quarterback. A group of neighbors coming together to find out what the best solution is for their community and then go out and solicit those dollars. It can be done at the localest of local levels.
Joe, you gave us some very practical ways to approach and to invest. How can individuals who are watching right now, who are saying, look, I have capital gains, where do they go to actually find these funds or be able to find the ways to begin or form a fund?
Yeah.
Can you hear us, Joe? I think we just lost Joe DeFelice. We'll make sure that we bring him back into the episode if we can get him back, or have him come in at a later date. It's really important that we talk about opportunity zones and make sure that as we address the economic development that's happening in the community, that we're playing at every level, not just at the community meeting, but making sure that we're in the development side of the dialogue as well. On a local level, we tell you all the time, all politics are local and all change begins locally. Right in Philadelphia, Councilwoman Kendra Brooks just joined her colleagues in the beginning of the legislative session for the year. Kendra Brooks is the first Working Families Party member elected to Philadelphia City Council in history. She has deep roots working across movement building organizations in Philadelphia. For those who understand Nicetown, she is a proud resident of Nicetown, and has taken care of Philadelphia long before she has gotten into office. Councilwoman Kendra Brooks, it's great having you on Heart of the City. Welcome home.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's dig right into this. There are tons of things to deal with in urban cities, Philadelphia being no stranger to those issues. Council session has started again. But what is the legislative focus of the body? I mean, obviously, criminal justice and areas of civil rights are, primary. We saw the protests throughout the summertime. But where's the focus of the body of council right now as we begin the sessions?
It's kind of a tough question. I think overall, the body is focusing on what it will look like to restore or empower Philadelphia post the pandemic. So we have groups that are really focused on housing and the homelessness issue that we have in the city. We have people that are focusing on the economic impact it had, the virus has had on small businesses and the economy here in Philadelphia. We have folks that are focusing on the educational impact and learning in this post-COVID environment. Excuse my background. My kids are still on online school.
No, I get it. That's happening all around the country.
Yeah, so we're trying to share multiple spaces here in the Philadelphia row home. So
I get it.
And I think overarchingly, my colleagues and I are focused on, just making sure Philadelphia is able to recover post the pandemic, and everyone will be approaching it from various avenues.
So, when we talk about restoring our commercial corridors, when we talk about small businesses coming back and having some level of impact, it's very clear African-American businesses have suffered tremendously through COVID. Commercial corridors around the country have witnessed long-standing businesses that were minority owned leaving and not preparing to come back at all. Talking about that small business loss, Forbes said 50% of Black businesses will not come back, those who are affected by COVID. How do we prepare for that reality and potentially restore some of those businesses or help those who have started during the pandemic to survive in a post-COVID world?
We're looking at several things. During the pandemic, myself, Councilmember Gim, and Councilmember Gautier, we introduced the Emergency Housing Protection Act, right? And that was to support renters. One thing we realized that renters also include small business owners, and we need to do more to make sure that small business owners are able to sustain business in this new environment that we have. Also, continue to push on the federal government to make sure money is coming down the pipe to support, our really small mom and pop business, like the Black-owned barbershops and hairdressers and, like stores and on the commercial corridors that aren't huge franchise or investments. We have to find a way to make sure the money is getting down to them. And those are some of the things that we're focusing on in various ways, making sure that the loan relief money is available for small business owners. Can you put your headphones in? Zion, can you put your headphones in? Oh.
You're a mother first. I get it.
I'm sorry, but yeah.
So criminal justice, social justice clearly was a hot topic throughout this whole year. We're still dealing with judgments, recent judgments like Breonna Taylor's judgment that just came out. There's still pending cases that are happening, all around the country for recent incidents like George Floyd and others. When we talk about what the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection will look like moving forward, what are some of the areas that we as citizens should be focusing on to help city council kind of guide the city to a palatable solution for people of color in the city?
I think, one of the major crises that I see is the housing issue. I think many Philadelphians were already cost burdened with rents prior to the pandemic. We have lower home ownerships of Black folks here in Philadelphia in general. And what is that going to look like when we have thousands of folks out of work for several months with no end in sight? Some businesses aren't coming back. Some people aren't going back to work when we have restaurants only at 25% capacity. So what is that going to look like long term for our housing issue that was already a problem here in Philadelphia? And when I talk about housing, sometimes we have the conversation about people being cost burdened and struggling to pay rents, but we don't talk about the already existing homelessness issue that we have in this city. And homelessness not only affects working people, we have our senior citizens that can't afford rents in the city and don't have a place to go and find themselves homeless. We have a large number of children that were formerly in foster care or coming out of incarceration that have nowhere to go. And those issues are going to continue to increase and grow post this pandemic because people have nowhere to turn. So what investments are we making in securing low income housing for Philadelphians?
And it seems like that issue is right at the forefront. We have an encampment right on the Parkway that has garnered not just local but national news. And obviously there's conversations that are happening between the administration with Mayor Jim Kenney and the encampment. But it seems like the encampment is representative of a myriad of issues that have happened through COVID and quite frankly, prior to. And so as we talk about, for example, Joe DeFelice from HUD was just on prior to you talking about opportunity zones. As we see developers coming in the space, knowing that opportunity zones are cut out throughout our whole city, what are the opportunities for us to really drive home a priority around affordable housing?
And I think a lot of times we're throwing the word around affordable housing, and affordable housing and low income housing is not the same thing.
Yeah.
We have 25% of people living below the $10,000 mark. That's and when we talk about affordable housing, when we talk about some of the development that's going up in Philadelphia and affordable housing, the threshold is $50,000, right? For you to even qualify. That eliminates a large number of people in Philadelphia. And I'm talking about working people. So I think that we definitely have to push the conversation around low income housing into affordability. And I think that sometimes that's missing in that conversation, starting even at the HUD level. Because a lot of the affordable housing development that's coming up in Philly does not cover enough low income housing to be able to begin to attack the issue that we have in our city. And, when we talk about people boots on the ground coming together and creating CDCs and offering opportunity. That's all fine and dandy. I get it. But when we're talking about folks that are fighting for low income, sometimes they don't even have access to people with capital to even begin to have this conversation to build, generate enough wealth to rehab properties or do a major development here in our city, in the neighborhoods that we created that were one time, no one wanted to live in. They were blighted and uninhabitable. Now they're fast and growing and popular, and the same residents in those communities don't have the ability to fight against huge developers to even be able to play ball in that field. And I think that we have to begin to look at that in a bigger way. So I definitely would love some of the great talent that has come out of Philly, including North Philly, where I'm from, to please stand up and help some of these smaller CDCs that are really community-based, community-focused, provide housing, affordable housing, low-income housing for the residents of the city. Because what we see is people being pushed to the waysides, so being pushed in the counties where they can find affordable housing, or people end up in encampments.
Yeah.
And some of those folks work. I've been down to the encampment myself. We're talking about working people that come, and that's home.
Right. And it's amazing to see literally the I guess ecosystem, for a better word, that they have created amongst themselves. I've had family and friends that have gone down directly to the encampment to help out in various ways. When we talk about, and you bring up a really key point, making sure that low income is included in the affordable housing conversation, there are community benefit agreements that tend to come through dialogue and negotiation. And I saw your face, so I'm anxiously awaiting this answer. Community benefit agreements typically have been bastardized and taken advantage of by those who had political interest, not community or progress interest for our people. Are those areas where we can be effective? Because many times developers are coming in, they already have the plans, the bond stack prepared, and now it's community meetings. And they co-opt one or two people out of the community, group, and they're off to the races. And oftentimes we get a dog park, when some of us don't even have the dog. The list goes on. And so can we revamp and address some of these issues through community benefit agreements?
Maybe some, but I think one of the things that we need to recognize as a people when we do these community agreements, we need to make sure they're binded. Like, we can't just have a handshake and say, oh yeah, we're going to get a park, and we end up with a dog park, right? Not a community center, right? Or a hub where people that in our communities could really use. Is actually preparation for the people that are come after us when we can no longer afford the taxes in the neighborhoods that we invested in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not against community agreements. I think that we need to make sure that they're legal and binded so we can hold people accountable. And when I say hold people accountable, I'm talking about the developers. I'm talking about the politicians, everybody who stood at the ribbon cutting. We all need to be accountable to the long-term investments that development has on communities. And it can't result in gentrification, which we have seen happen throughout the city.
Right.
So yeah, I'm for community benefits agreements, but we need to make sure they have teeth and we're able to get all the things that we want and need, not a co-opted version or watered down version of what Black people want in their community. And the only way we can do that is for folks like you and I, or community leaders, to really take a deep dive and really begin to talk to folks in the community, not the few chosen folks that they show up for every meeting. We talking about good old fashioned going door to door, have conversations with people on what is it that we really need, and we know that we need investments in our young people. We know that we need green space, even though that's not what we call it. We need trees, right? We need grass. We need parks and recreation centers. Right. We need quality schools, right? Those are the things that we need in our community. And we continue to allow development to happen and leave us out of all of that.
You know, you talked about going door to door, tried and true methods, not just for winning an election, but actually getting to know your neighbors, getting to know the needs of the community, and that should be a focal point as you discussed talking to neighbors. Media oftentimes takes the soundbite from the elected official, slants it whatever way that they choose, and often leaves you reeling or backpedaling from this skewed voice or comment that they've posted. In this space, as we close the interview, what is it that you want those who are residents of Philadelphia or even beyond to know and hear from your heart as councilwoman and a concerned leader in Philadelphia?
I would love all Philadelphians to realize it is our responsibility. I'm talking about my Black folks that live in the hood. It's our responsibility to be involved in every process that comes through our streets. So we need to not shy away from spaces that we feel uncomfortable. We have to make our presence known and continue to talk about the things that we need. That's the only way we're going to have what we need for our children and grandchildren and be able to maintain our community. We've done it before and we could do it again. And we've done it before with less.
Yeah, that we have. You've given us a couple of things to think about. I'm always honored to see you in motion, and great to have you with us today on Heart of the City. Thank you so much for taking time out in between being councilwoman and mom to join us on the broadcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You too. So you've heard from Councilwoman Kendra Brooks. She gave us, quite frankly, some motherly advice around what we need to do to really ensure that Philadelphia is going to have the progress that it needs. Yes, community benefits agreements and things of that nature are great tenets of progress if done correctly. But more importantly, we need to know, we need to have the knowledge, and we need to talk to each other about the issues of the day and what each other's needs are. That's not just in Philadelphia, but around the country. And even in North Carolina, we are having election conversation as it relates to leadership and what that's going to look like in a post-pandemic world. I'm excited to have with us Dr. Aimy Steele. She is the candidate for North Carolina House District 82. It is so good to have you on Heart of the City. Welcome home.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you hear me good?
We got you loud and clear. So let's dig into this. There are so many things that your experience, your leadership could have been applied to. And you woke up one day and said, you know what, I'm going to run for state house. What was the premise behind that, that allowed you to say, you know what, I'm going to give my leadership in this way?
Sure. So I wish I just woke up like this, but it actually was a lot deeper than that. So having served as a Spanish teacher and a K-12 school principal, I was actually faced with having this, like all of these laws and legislation and policies put for me as a principal. And I realized, you know, there was something missing. People were giving us policies and procedures and laws to follow, but they had never stepped foot in a classroom themselves or in a school long term to see kind of how schools operate. When people do that, they have a different perspective. They make laws. And so the key issue came in August of 2017 when I received a call from my district superintendent or assistant superintendent saying, you know, we need to make room for some teachers. So I made room for 3 teachers, and we were trying to comply with class size legislation that had recently been passed. So we moved some things around literally 2 days before open house, and we settled, we made it work. The teachers were great and everything was fine. Well, then I got the same call in November saying you need to do it again, but this time for 5 more teachers. And I said, this policy, like what is making me have to do this as a principal? Because it's not easy to shuffle teachers around, nor is it easy to find space in your school when it was built in the 60s. And I said, so what's causing this? They said, well, it's because the North Carolina General Assembly passed yet another portion of their law saying that we needed smaller class sizes in K-12 spaces or K-2 classrooms. And in order to do that, you'd have to, divide up your teachers more, and we're going to send you some more teachers. And I said, well, I don't have any other available classroom space. And they said, well, Amy, you need to be creative. And I said, well, to be creative, I would have to take the gymnasium, the library, and the stage of the cafeteria, and then make the PE teacher and the art or music teacher move around and travel on a cart. And having been a Spanish teacher who traveled on a cart while 9 months pregnant, I know that's not the ideal teaching space for a teacher. So I said, these are my only ideas. And they said, well, we'll just have to go with that. I said, now, who did you say made these stupid laws anyway? And they said the North Carolina General Assembly. I said, well, it's time to make that change. Like, someone has to fix this and address this. And my assistant superintendent so wisely suggested I take care of that. So the next month I filed to run for office, and here I am.
Wow. That, it's interesting because most great leaders in the elected space often ran because of a problem, not because they were seeking to gain higher access or power. And I think that's a really crucial point. Education is a hot topic, not just in Concord, but around the country. What are some of the ways that we as constituents need to focus and rally around those elected leaders in the State House to ensure that conversation around educational resources aren't just a talking point during campaign time and an afterthought once they're in office?
Well, I think constituents in general just need to realize that all of the major decisions that are made about your local and your state educational system happen within your state chamber. So they happen in the State House, the state Senate, the state legislative body, et cetera, because power is extended to the states to control their own educational system. From there, you have the dissemination of power to the local boards of election and things like that. But in general, it is a state level issue to deal with your own state's public education system. And so what we're seeing is kind of this systemic dismantling of public education around the nation. I was recently reading Gene Nichols' book called Indecent Assembly, and it really chronicles what's been done to harm the various systems in North Carolina, but particularly public education. And so what we see is this flux of vouchers for private schools, this flux of the creation of charter schools and the charter school movement, and how, there are so many things that are being done to attack public education, including the dismantling of funding.
Absolutely.
So once constituents realize that the power lies within their state houses, they'll take those races more seriously and put people who are pro-education in those seats of power.
Are you seeing a increase in registration in North Carolina? I mean, obviously, this is a heavy partisan climate as we enter into November. Here in Philadelphia, quite frankly, sometimes they're celebrating, 17% turnout, which I think is abysmal when you're considering that, roughly 83% are saying, I'll let these others decide my fate. What's happening in North Carolina around registration, and are you seeing an uptick or some of the same challenges that you're seeing that we see in other cities?
Well, we've seen about 600,000 new registered voters over the last couple years, or a few years rather. And, my campaign particularly has seen about 100 new registered voters over the last 3 weeks. So we are seeing a lot of excitement around voting. The issue is not, or around registering. The issue is not necessarily around registering to vote as much as it's around turnout. So to your point about 17%, in North Carolina, we are seeing higher than usual turnout in general over the last few elections, because we're seeing just behind the notion that we're not going to sit back and let people just continue doing things to us. We're actually going to become a part of the political process. And so I talk about this all the time, but there's this notion of linked fate. When people see people who look like them in positions of power, they automatically link their fate to those persons that they see in power. So it is essential that we court voters that we want to turn out. So I'll just, focus on the African-American vote right now. If we want Black voters to turn out, then we have to court Black voters. Why else do we spend money on TV ads, radio ads, digital buys, and mail programs for everyone if we're not going to also target Black voters whom we want to turn out and whom we say are the base of certain parties. It's too often that we rely on a certain group of people to show up for a certain party, but then we only target certain people in that group as opposed to targeting all. People have already taken the first step. They've registered. Now we have to target them and encourage them to come out and vote. And when we do that, we then help to stop the cycle of low turnout.
I think you bring up some key challenges that I think are not just in local party conversation, but need to happen at the national level. Micro targeting inside of our community is no longer, accepted or acceptable in the space. And we need to have a collective conversation when you're talking about people of color, specifically African Americans, and what we need in this community. I am excited about your candidacy. Tell those who are watching how they can get in touch with your candidacy, learn more about it. If they're in the North Carolina area, to call friends and family and tell them to get on board and to support as well.
Absolutely. So thank you for allowing me to share. So my name is Aimy Steele. And if you look at my name, it's Aimy. And I say it's because I aim high. So aim Y. So my website is AimySteele2020.com. So that's AIMYSTEELE 2020.com.
So those who are watching, please make sure you go and visit the website. We are excited about this candidacy, and we expect some really, really, really great things to happen, not just in North Carolina, but around the country as well. Dr. Steele, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So we're having conversations around the country around elective seats, where we need to be, what needs to happen. Is so important that you get out, you register to vote, and then more importantly, you actually vote. That is the key thing. It's not just enough to register, but you have to turn out on election day. I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm not telling you what party you should align with. What I'm telling you is, if you want your voice to be heard, you have to come out and vote for yourself. There is no one that's going to be able to tell your story in the voting booth better than you. For those who are checking us out in the new online space, we brought over with us from the radio show our EKG section, the legendary EKG section. I'll tell you, I am excited to have these two individuals with us to bring in our EKGs. Maxayn Gooden, she is the founder and executive director of the Women of Valor and JA World programs. It's always good to have you with us, Max. Let's see if we can get her.
I'm here. I'm sorry. Thanks for having me.
Good. And right in the middle, bringing the ball through for the touchdown, Reverend Dwayne Watts, the minister over at Holy Temple Church. It's always good to have you with us as well.
Thank you, Daily. It's good to be back with you.
Listen, there are many things for us to discuss in the space, clearly around the country and right here at home. Are you guys ready for the EKGs?
Yes.
Yep, let's roll.
This is the EKG, the part of the show where we place America front and center on the monitors of the American people. We will look for irregularities in the heartbeat, offer solutions on the issues we find in order to make America healthy once again. So fire up the machine. Let's start the EKG.
This week's EKGs are brought to you by mydeshuri.com. Please make sure you go and check out that minority-owned wellness company. Our first story, WHYY, is reporting that Philly City Council calls for a new eviction moratorium and passing emergency sick leave. We just saw dozens of bills introduced in the first session. We also had Councilwoman Kendra Brooks join us to talk about some of the other issues like the homeless encampment that has occurred in the city of Philadelphia. Dwayne, what do you want to see happen as it relates to city council and some of the legislative priorities?
My prayer and hope is that there's some parity where they are designing whatever their policies and procedures may be, that speaks evenly to all audiences that are affected by this issue. Unfortunately, there's too often and too frequently a kind of a have and have not situation. And I did hear the interview earlier with Councilwoman Brooks, and as she mentioned, a lot of times that we confuse the conversation between what's affordable housing against what is low income housing. But we're speaking with a broad brush as opposed to using an artist tip to the issue.
Max, you know, that low income, affordable housing conversation is so crucial. Oftentimes we know when there is economic instability, crime occurs, levels of high violence, you deal in that space, counseling families and addressing some of the challenges that exist there. What are some of the legislative focuses that you want to see in City Council as they begin their sessions?
I feel like whatever they put in place, there has to be longevity wise. I don't feel like it can be. So I also, work for the Philadelphia Housing Authority. And I feel sometimes that, unfortunately, a lot of those residents aren't educated with budgeting and things of that nature.
Right.
I feel like if we're going to offer something in regards to helping them with their rent, they also have to offer education programs to show them how to utilize these funds, or even have something in place where it's maybe monthly a lower pay for that rent that will kind of eventually catch them up, due to the lack of education and stuff like that. I don't feel like we can just say, here's this money, pay your rent, because then we're going to be right back at the same situation again.
I think you bring up some really key points. Our next EKG talks exactly about that. WCNC is reporting of a young woman, Fantasia Cross. She was laid off from her job at a nursing home, still unable to find employment in North Carolina. She says, look, it's just not right. She feels that she was left to choose between groceries or internet for her kids' school while struggling amid the pandemic. Clearly, the federal pandemic unemployment assistance has expired. That's $600 a week. Fantasia said it's really hard not being able to find a job and not being able to work. It's like no one wants to give you a chance. I just want to live and be comfortable, and my kids have what they need to prosper. We know right now we have a homeless encampment right in Philadelphia that has gained national attention as a result. What is it that we can do for those who are still hanging on, for those who still have access to means and resource? Obviously, it is an all hands on deck issue in our communities, whether it be churches or nonprofit organizations. We recognize that the food banks have been worked and overworked in many cases in trying to provide. But what are some of the synergies? Both of you are in the space as experts around serving the community. Are there any synergistic partnerships that we are missing when it comes to solutions? Max?
You would throw that one at me first, almost. For me, education is key. And I keep going back to that because I think of the residents that I serve and deal with. And so part of my educating them was when we all got the that big payment, the economic stimulus payment.
Yeah.
And I kind of taught them like how to budget that versus, okay, well, I got this big lump sum of money. Let me go get the seafood and stuff. Hey, let's budget and try to, spread it out where when this thing really hits that you're not really, stuck in a sense.
Yeah.
So I just feel like, again, education is key for me. Yeah.
Dwayne, education being key. Our people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. That is not just biblical prose, but that is true to life impact that occurs on a daily basis. What are some of the ways that we can educate our community members in this time?
Well, I think as a whole, we have to move from a place of just empathy to activity. What oftentimes happens is that we say, oh, we recognize the issue, we feel bad about an issue, but that's where it stops. To everyone's common point, we do have to be kind of mobilized to being engaged and active. which is really where the rubber meets the road. You know, we can go what did we say about talk being cheap. And what we have to do is find those entities, those resources that are willing to bring resources to those who are not educated enough. And what oftentimes happens, like we need to kind of acknowledge that education doesn't stop between just K to 12, but we have to realize that education is the new civil rights issue of the day, bringing all types of resources and powers to the community so that they can know how to not necessarily budget, but have a change in mindset, saying it's about wealth building as opposed to how do you manage the dollar that's in your pocket. And what we're seeing is that there's not enough organizations that are out there doing that. For instance, there is one in Germantown that is really boots on the ground. It's called Urban Youth Kings and Queens. And what they do is that they saw well before the district announced the need, they said, well, we need to have a virtual learning site. They engaged, hired the 2 employees, and now are partnered with a local church in a space. And they're not just doing the remote learning with 20 slots, but they're also doing a Kings and Queens mentoring program at the same location. And there's not enough of those boots on the ground resources that are happening.
Boots on the ground are absolutely crucial in the space, and making sure that they're empowered with resources to be able to do what's needed. We know oftentimes the concept of bubble gum and shoestrings is the way that much of our service has been done, and that is quite frankly unnecessary. Especially when we have resources that are at our disposal, and knowledge is really the key that is going to unlock that. Our last EKG talks about one of our hip hop legends, progressive activist, Killer Mike, slammed for meeting with a GOP governor. Now, obviously, he's an Atlanta rapper, activist. He's facing a wave of scrutiny from Democrats over his decision to meet with Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, who happens to be a Republican. News of this meeting first got out through the rapper himself on his Instagram. And in the post, he quoted his partner, Courtney Seals, who was also present at the meeting. Now, Seals described this meeting as a salt of the earth conversation between Kemp and Render. Killer Mike also thanked those who advised him on going to the meeting, and Render also thanked those who advised him on talking points for the community at large. Now, I'll just say this. I have been a recipient of the backhand from the community as it relates to meeting with those who we are at odds with for whatever reasons. I've just always been taught you never let the bully go on the block without having a meeting with him, especially if you take care of the block. That's what old school folk would tell you. You don't just run in the house and allow whatever is going to happen to your street to happen. How do we get around? Dwayne, this is a big issue. You know, it's almost an all or nothing conversation right now in America. If you don't agree with everything that I say, there's no conversation to be had at all. Unfortunately, that is not the sausage making process in legislation. We need to have dialogue, even with those we may not necessarily agree with on topics. How do we get our community around that that fallacy and ultimately a fatal flaw?
Well, I speaking within the context of this being a bipartisan issue, I think we need to stop politicizing morality. Right? We have to get to the point where we actually say, hey, this is just about a need and not about affiliation. And, you know, growing up the way we may have, we were told that you can't satisfy the masses. Whether you're going left or going right, there's going to be some detractors in some capacity or another. But you do need to have enough wherewithal within you to say, I'm going to do this for a better goal or aim. So I applaud, you know, Mike for that purpose. But I think part of the problem is we have and I used the analogy previously about how we need to be able to run all 8 lanes of the racetrack. And unfortunately, in our community, some people only want to run that one lane. Therefore, they're not able to diversify. As Paul said, I became all things to all people that I may just win some. And unfortunately, we have a complexion about becoming all things or being diverse. We do it in our communities, code switching, etc. But that is for the greater aim. And unfortunately, in our communities, they don't even realize that a person doing these things is actually to their betterment. So we kind of need to make sure that we're packaging that message a little bit better, and at the same time, not weigh so much on it as if it matters.
That's interesting that you talk about that, Max. You nodded your head throughout the whole comment. It was almost as if he was in a sermon. Your thoughts around this issue of not understanding the pragmatic approach to progress.
I mean, I agree with everything he said. That's why I was nodding so much. I feel like, don't we have enough stuff to, like, real life issues to worry about? And I feel like I applaud him for not caring what people think, but doing what he felt he needed to do in order to advise this Republican candidate on what the needs are in his community.
Yeah.
And I applaud him for that. And we as a community, just like we have to get out that mind frame, because no matter what, it takes a whole to fix all of these issues that we have going on.
And I think also to everybody's point throughout this conversation, it's important that we hold the individuals that we have a conversation with accountable once they have taken an oath, once they have said that they will represent the Commonwealth or whatever municipality that is under their purveyance, that they actually follow through on the dialogue. Many received so much critique from meeting with candidate Trump, we know, and then ultimately President Trump. My personal take on that, having met with candidate Trump prior to the election, was, how do I know that he knows what we need if no one's in the room to actually tell him? I don't need a genie in office. I need somebody who's going to listen to my people in office. Reverend Dwayne, that's something that the clergy has focused on as a long time part of the mission and pillars of the community. It was known for a fact that you had to sit down with the pastor or the leaders and really come to a consensus about an agenda. But now in today's time, we have a fragmented agenda, sometimes from block to block, let alone from city to city. How do we come together in this new landscape to ensure that there is at least a collective focus on progress, one that does not get lost in talking points on the campaign trail, and then ultimately scuttle to the House floor when it's time to actually moving forward?
I think part of the wrestling match that we're seeing is that there's a confusion of terms. There's a difference between understanding and agreeing. I can understand you and not necessarily agree, but what we're having folks try to mix up is that in order for me to even say I understand you, that means I stand in agreement. And that's not necessarily the case. We need to kind of find that territory where we can say, well, look, there is a common ground that we can stand on to accomplish whatever it may need to be accomplished, even legislatively. And I think we end up enforcing again or politicizing our morals on whatever the agenda may be, and we're ultimately affecting a pocket of society that ends up disenfranchised and disadvantaged because you're standing on something else that they're not.
Wow. Max, your thoughts? I mean, you deal with this not just at the elected level, but you're talking to families, you're in their homes. You're getting the mindset of not just the community, but the local family themselves. Talk about what's happening in the homes, the mindset there. Are you seeing a shift towards a willingness to begin to put together a collective agenda? I know that's a loaded question.
I say yeah. I say yes and no. It brings me to a conversation I had with a family today, and we were having actually the conversation about how she felt that she was being treated by an officer in a certain situation. Okay. And So I basically had to break it down of, you know, the what the situation was and the emotional, how she felt emotionally, how that officer felt emotionally, and how that impacted what was happening in that moment. So I feel like it has to be understanding on both sides in order to come to some agreement, or in order to meet in the middle with certain things, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And again, that goes back to the pragmatic conversation. Many times we miss the forest for the trees because we allow media to create angst where there is none. We allow division to happen where there could be compromise and a bridge could be built. I'm excited that both of you are building bridges in our community. Reverend Dwayne, tell the audience who's watching the program right now where they can connect with you, how to connect and build bridges with you.
Sure. Well, I can be found on social media under Dwayne Watts, first name, last name. I also am at Holy Temple Church, and our website is holytemplechurchinc.org. And we're located in the Art Museum area of the city of Philadelphia. You can also find us on social media platforms under the same. And I also want to be able to broadcast the fact that, you know, we are doing a lot of boots on the ground things. So anyone desires to reach out, partner, if I can't do it, I'll refer you to someone else who can. But you know, we're always thinking if there's an opportunity and there's the ability, then there's a chance to impact change.
Absolutely. Max, you have an event coming up, Power Up. I'm quite familiar with this as well. Talk about that event and how those who are watching can actually engage.
Yes, so we're having our second Power Up 2 on Sunday, and that's Sunday, September 20th from 2 to 3, and this is our youth and young adult version, and I'm really excited. We're going to have Sir from 103.9 FM come on and talk about entrepreneurship, talk about how to build your own website, talk about podcasting. We're going to have Paul Marie Desir, who was in our Power Up 1, to talk about how you can purchase stock at a young age and build wealth and have generational wealth, which is what we're trying to achieve in our community. And it's going to be, of course, moderated again by Malik Boyd, who did just such a phenomenal job on the first one. So I'm really excited about our Power Up 2 event. And you can see it live on my Facebook page, which is Woman of Valor 74.
So I am excited. I think I know that guy, Malik Boyd. Hopefully, the joint. But I think that's going to be a very good workshop, especially for our young people who are super entrepreneurial, far more entrepreneurial than our group growing up. So I'm excited to see them get the tools for success. Thank you both for joining the EKG segment this week. It's always good to see both of you and to know that all is well.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you for the time and thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you.
So we are covered now. We've done the EKGs. You've heard from Reverend Dwayne Watts and Maxayn Gooden on the issues of the day. I'm going to Black History Fact Song of the Week. On the other side, Pete Kane and Jeffrey Abramowitz. You're going to hear their amazing stories and some of the great work that they are doing in the space. It is the Black History Fact of the Week time. Why do we do Black History every week? Because we make Black history every day. If you don't believe me, take out your phone, take a picture of your fine self. You are living Black history. Our focal point of this week's Black History Fact is Lucy E. Parsons.
Lucy E. Parsons was a leading figure in American anarchism and the radical labor movement. Born a slave in Waco, Texas, she married Albert R. Parsons, who had become a white radical Republican after serving first as a Confederate soldier. In 1873, Albert and Lucy moved to Chicago, where they become involved in radical labor organizing. 13 years later, she rose to national fame when she embarked on a speaking tour to raise money for her husband, who was one of 9 men tried and sentenced to be executed for speaking in such a way as to inspire the bomber to violence following the Haymarket Square bombing, which killed a Chicago policeman. Lucy Parsons remained an activist after the execution of Albert, and in 1892 founded the newspaper Freedom, which addressed such issues as labor organizing, lynching, and black peonage in the South. In 1905, Parsons became the only woman to address the founding convention of the industrial workers of the world. In the early 1930s, Parsons joined in the defense of the Scottsboro Boys and Angelo Herndon. Parsons died accidentally in a house fire in 1942. Our hearts go out to the legacy of Lucy E. Parsons. Please share this Black History fact with those you love.
Our song of the week is none other than Mango. That's performed by Kamau featuring Adeline. Make sure you check it out on iTunes or the Google Play Store. It is only $1.29. Make sure you support local music and support those who are in the creative space. I'm going to a commercial break. On the other side, Pete Kane and Jeffrey Abramowitz. You are watching The Heart of the City online.
A billion boys and girls who are young, gifted, and black, and that's a fact, yeah. To be young, gifted, and black, oh, what a lovely, precious dream. In the whole world, you know, there's a billion boys and girls who are young, gifted, and black, and that's a fact, yeah.
You're watching The Heart of the City. We're back in the second hour. I am excited to have Pete Kane with us, and a legend. He is an absolute legend in the broadcast space, recently retired. I'm trying to be like him when I grow up and get to the retired space. It's just a pleasure having you with us. Welcome home to Heart of the City, Pete.
I really appreciate being here with you all today. Thank you very much for that intro.
So let's talk about this. You have witnessed the broadcast, the news, and journalism space occur not just in Philadelphia, but around the country. And you've watched minorities be able to play major roles in the production and narration of our news. Talk about that journey for you, because obviously where you've ended certainly wasn't where you started. There were many twists and turns along the way. Was there one memorable experience in all of these years that you've served our community?
Well, there are a lot of memories, and the biggest thing for me was back in May 13, 1985, the bombing on Osage Avenue of the Moo compound. In my 47 years at the station, and 35 of them being in news, that was the biggest story that I covered. Over the years, there have been many. I'm a young kid that came from North Philadelphia. I was 18 years old at Channel 10 in the mailroom. And I spent years in the mailroom, and I attended night school for photography, journalism, filmmaking. There was a black cameraman at Channel 3, Mike Boyer, who was my first mentor in the career that I took. Mike taught me how to shoot film, how to shoot video, and he worked for the competition, but he ran a school for minorities, 38th and Girard. 38th and Girard. So I went to school there and I learned how to do what I ended up doing and making a career out of it. Because one of the things is that coming from North Philly, as I heard a lot of your speakers earlier talked about the inner city, a lot of things that are going on there. I witnessed that. Growing up around 18th and Girard, not far from where that compound is on Ridge and Master. I was like 3 blocks from there. And in that area where that compound is, I remember April 5th, 1955, when the rioting and looting started in North Philly, and that was the day after Dr. King was killed. And that happened to be the day that I turned 13 years old. So when what happened on May the 30th, that Saturday, the looting in Center City and the looting around the city of Philadelphia, it brought back memories for me being a 13-year-old kid, seeing my neighborhood, my city being torn apart. So it was deja vu for me. And that also happened to be the same day I lost my sister, the same night I lost my sister to COVID-19. So my journey through the years, I have experienced a lot. I've lost several relatives, black males on the city streets of Philadelphia being gunned down. So the stories I covered every day also happen to be my story. And so it's been a journey. But one thing I can say is I've experienced a lot of positive things in my career. And one of them being that for 8 years, I was at Philadelphia International Airport when President Obama landed in Air Force One. And for me to see a black man walk up off Air Force One and walk across that tarmac to shake people's hands and aboard his vehicles that headed to places in the Delaware Valley, that was real. That was a positive excitement for me, seeing that happen.
You know,
Mhm.
it's interesting that you talk about some of these memorable experiences. Clearly, witnessing President Obama and the regalness of the administration is a memorable thing indeed. You you actually put yourself in harm's way. You mentioned the move incident. For those who may not understand, you were one of the few, if not the only, who had critical footage of that incident. You ended up staying on the street, and if I get this story correctly, you were hiding on in the second floor of another home, of literally across the street, to be able to film that. Understanding that there are probably a myriad of feelings that exist as a result of that event. What was it like? Could you potentially summarize your feelings that day, that moment, capturing what would essentially be historical footage?
Wow. Let me go back to that Friday prior to that Monday of the bombing. That Friday, the station, we were put on standby. Some of the camera guys were put on standby that Friday. That the police department may be going into Osage Avenue to try to negotiate with the MOVE members to come out of their compound on 62 on the block of Osage. So that was on Friday, and that Sunday after coming in from church, I get a phone call from the station to head out to Osage Avenue that police are going to go out and talk to MOVE members, or try to talk to MOVE members out of 6221 Osage. Getting out on the scene there with some of my other co-workers, we set up on a corner of 62nd and Pine, our live truck. And eventually we were back from that area. But prior to that, I had befriended a person that was in the area that I needed to get into a house on 62nd Street, looking down Osage to just grab video of whatever was going on Osage Avenue. I got into that house at 8:30 that Sunday night, May the 12th, Mother's Day. And getting in there, the family, the Austin family, they're both deceased now, but I didn't know them, but they let me stay in the house. They were evacuated at 9:30 by the police. I hid in the house and I stayed there from 8:30 Sunday night to 8:30 Monday night.
Wow.
In that 24 hours I was in that house, I witnessed the police were the electric company, gas company cutting off the power, cutting gas to Osage Avenue, 62nd Street. Even the house I was in, the power was cut off. So I hid in the house overnight. I listened to police and MOVE on a bullhorn throughout the night. At 10:06 Monday morning, May the 13th, gunfire started. I'm a gun guy, so I mean I know what guns are like. I mean I know what bullets are like. But afterwards, I found out I went through 10,000 rounds of bullets throughout
Wow.
that time I was in that house from 8:30, from 10:06 Monday morning until I left that house 8:30 Sunday night, 3 hours after the bomb was dropped at 5:27. So I went through the tear gas, I went through the fire. When the fire got out of control, I was on the phone with my station throughout the day, doing live reports with Steve Levy, Larry Kane, and at some point they told me to get out the house I was in. So 3 hours after that fire got out of control, I snuck out the back alley, 2 blocks away to Harvey Clark and one of the other crews for my safety. But going through that alley, that dark alley was, I just thought any minute I'd get a bullet in the back of my head. But just
Wow.
thank God I made it out.
We're thankful that you made it out. And you
It's
told.
still a nightmare. It's still a nightmare.
I'm sure it is. I'm listening to the story and hearing the impact that it had on you just in the words, even as you summarize it. One can only imagine, what it feels like firsthand. And those are just a few of the situations that cameramen find themselves in. I think in many situations, we always pay attention to the one in front of the camera, but you're the one keeping the camera steady in the midst of the hurricane, in the midst of the storm, behind gunfire, riots, things of that nature. Was this something that you just knew was going to be a path for you, or was it something that God literally just opened up an opportunity and you walked through that door?
You know what? At the age of 13, when Dr. King was killed and the riot in the city happened, I want to be a police officer. I mean, from that day, I said I want to do whatever I can to make my neighborhood safe, to make people safe. That's what I wanted to do. And even when I was on the journey of becoming a cameraman, I was still looking at fulfilling that dream. And I started in the mailroom in November of 73. I was hired staff in the mailroom March 4th to 74. And in 83, I was going into the police department. I took the test and went through background, the whole bit. But I had already attended 7, 8 years of school to become a cameraman. So I had to make a decision. Do I follow that path to join the police department, or do I pursue that journey to becoming a cameraman? And it was a hard decision for me to make. But the reason I became a cameraman was that I was always told a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I thought that maybe video is worth 1,000,000 words.
And indeed,
and that's why I chose what I do. And I've been through, I remember 25th in York years ago. I was responding to the report of a shootout with police and alleged drug dealers. When I got to 25th and York, I was setting up my live truck to go live. And when I was there, I was on the phone with my assignment desk, and I remember Carolyn from the assignment desk on the phone saying that the gunshots I hear. I didn't know a guy had stepped out the alley a block away with a AK-47 and started shooting at the cops. I never heard it.
Wow.
I had actually ran up and grabbed me and threw me underneath the back of my my police van.
Wow.
I mean, on the back of my my news van, and he had his gun out. I mean, he basically saved my life. And there's other times I've been out there, but my thing is, you can't tell the story if you're not out there. And I mean, I took the overnight shift 5 years ago, and overnights are just shootings after shootings. I mean, 2 years ago, this December, just before I came on 11 o'clock that night, I get a phone call from my cousin at 10:15 that her grandson was shot up in Kensington. I knew going on 11 o'clock, that would have been my first story of the triple shooting in Kensington. And when she told me that they were at Torresdale Hospital, they're not getting any information on his condition. I called Chief Inspector Small, who I spoke to almost every night because he handles overnight shooting and things like that. I interviewed him several times a week. And he told me they had a triple shooting up in Kensington. And I said, well, my cousin was one of the people that was shot. And I found out then that the 19-year-old kid had died. And that was my cousin. And the hardest thing was going to the hospital in emergency room. I called my job, told them where I was going. And as usual, they say, do what you got to do. So I ended up in the emergency room until like 12, 1 o'clock in the morning with my family when they came and told us he had passed away. And that's like the 5th or 6th relative in 12 years I've lost on the streets of Philly.
Wow.
So those stories, those 5, 6, 7 shootings I do every week, it could be a family member. That's why I treat people the same way I would want to be treated, because it could be my family the next day.
Yeah.
So it's,
indeed.
yeah.
We,
but like,
You have so many stories, but also you offer so much perspective on the issues. A lot of times when people think of media, they think that it is a drone-like procedure, that you're just reporting the news and you have no feelings at all, or that it's not affecting your family. But you talk about the humanity that exist inside of the profession for those like myself who are standing on your shoulders, able to do programs like this now because of what you did for us for so many years. What would be some of the words of advice that you would give us?
Always learn, each one teach one. You know, growing up as a young black kid from North Philadelphia, where I never, I mean, I went to, when I graduated Ben Franklin High School, I attended Westchester, and there wasn't many blacks at Westchester. And my whole goal there was to spend 4 years at Westchester, to come out at 21 years of age. At that time, that was the age to join the police department. I dropped out after a year because it helped my mother raise my four younger brothers. So over the years, what I started doing from day one was going into the schools, talking to young kids, black, white, whatever, about making the right decisions now in life. Because if you get in trouble now and you could get a 4-year degree, you can get a master's degree, but if you have a felony on your record, you may not get that job that you're working for. So when I go into the school and I talk to the young kids, especially young black males, about joining the police department, join law enforcement, the first thing they say to me is, I don't want to get shot. I said, sit back and think about it. How many police officers are shot every year? How many young black males are shot every year?
Right.
And they'll say, well, I didn't think about that. I said, only way you're going to change your environment is become part of what can help change it. When I'm on the street, I mean, a lot of my friends are cops. When MOVE happened, I was terrified of the police department because I had to testify to the grand jury the following year in reference to what went on. And then I found out that they weren't mad at me because their wives sitting at home was watching Channel 10 and listening to me give live reports throughout the day, letting them know that their husbands are okay. Yeah. So I felt better after that. But on the overnight shift, only ones on that street are me, the camera guys from the other stations, and the police officers, and sometimes the people who are committing the crimes. So when I'm out there at nighttime, these police officers are friends of mine, and I befriend them, and they know that the media, we're not the enemy. Okay. Our thing is to tell a story. Most of the people I work with, they're all good people. They'll come to me and ask me about things that are going on in the inner city because I still belong to a church in North Philadelphia. I'm still part of the community I came out of. I didn't, get this job and then go, okay, I'm not going to think about, whatever goes on there. My family still, friends still live there. So what I tell everyone is, I heard some of you call it earlier about getting involved in community things within the inner city. We can help these young people see that they have a future. We got what we want. We have to help them get what they want. I retire because my thing is I've done what I need to do. There's somebody who may be losing their job if I keep is that let some of these younger people be able to get to where I am. And it's like, you have this, I mean, I'm not a selfish person, never have been and never will be. And in this job I've had for these years, leaving on August 20th was the hardest thing to do because I know I still have a lot in me to be able to help other people.
Well, I'll tell you,
and I
Pete,
appreciate you guys too, man.
No, we appreciate you. We love you, my brother. We're thankful for what the Creator has given you and the gift and talent that you have poured, not just into the profession, but into our community as well. And we want you to know that we thank you and appreciate you.
I appreciate you all doing what you're doing, and it's people like you that are going to help make a difference.
And it's because you showed us the way, Pete. Thank you so much for taking time out to
appreciate it
with us today.
Thank you. You have a good day. God bless you.
God bless you. So we heard from Pete Kane, one of the legendary cameramen in, I will say, the country, not just the city of Philadelphia. Because of his great work, we were able to capture a lot of what has occurred in the city of Philadelphia. And he has set not only the technique, but the pathway for many of us who are now in this new age of journalism to be able to tell the stories of the day. I am excited as well for my next guest, Jeffrey Abramowitz. He is the executive director for reentry services for JEVS right here in Philadelphia. He's also the program director of Looking Forward Philadelphia. He was a 2018 fellow for Just Leadership USA and recently served as the director of student services and workforce development for Community Learning Center. Jeffrey, it is an absolute pleasure having you on Heart of the City. Welcome home, my friend.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. I actually, I grew up in Philadelphia, so seeing Kane on gave me chills to hearing some of his stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah, incredible guy.
So let's get into this. Jeff, you have a unique story. It's not just, applying academia to a particular space of reentry and things of that nature. You've actually experienced this yourself. So talk about your journey and why your passion and purpose is locked into this moment right now.
Wow. Yeah. So I guess I grew up in Philadelphia in the Alny section, went to Central High School, graduated from Central, and wanted to be a lawyer. So went to law school and then came home and practiced law in Philadelphia for 20 years, there to 15th and Market Street. Became a partner there. And so I always fulfilled my dream, becoming a lawyer. But, as life has it, you make choices. And around 9.5 years ago, made some horrible choices that led to a federal indictment. And they say the two most important days of your life are the day you're born. A lot of people say the day you die. And for me, the second most important day is the day you find out why you're born. And that happened in a courtroom on March of 2012 when a judge sentenced me to 5 years in a federal penitentiary. And I knew my life was going to change dramatically. And it did. It gave me a new perspective. When you lose everything you have, a wife, a home, cars, all the things that you thought were important, and you're stripped down and sitting in a cell and you're butt naked, you tend to be real reflective and you start thinking, wow, what's going on and what's this about? And from that moment on, my life changed forever. So I did my time away and spent 5 years at a pretty bad place called USP Kane, upstate Pennsylvania, and returned to Philly. It was 5 years ago on Friday that I returned to Philadelphia, came back, and I'm a proud person. I refuse to take any handouts or anything like that. So I lived in a halfway house and then a shelter in Philadelphia and was pretty much homeless. I got lucky. I walked into a place at Broad and Lehigh and said, hey, I taught 50 classes while I was away in prison. I read over 1,000 books. I got this passion. I want to share my knowledge and help people. And they gave me a chance teaching GED math and quickly became an executive director there of workforce development at a community learning center at Broad and Lehigh and in West Philadelphia. And after that, things kind of just took off.
It's you mentioned something that really resonated with me. We accumulate so many material things. Many of us are taught to go to school to get this degree only to accumulate things. Your purpose, your passion was found after all of those things were pretty much removed from the picture. Talk about moments of clarity and why they're so important for purpose.
So I always, and I speak a lot about my journey now, not only locally, but across the country. And one of the things I want to tell people is that, I wear a different set of glasses than I wore before. When you go inside the prison walls, you're all wearing green. You're all the same. You have no title. You have no nice car, no house. You're not living in the suburbs. You have no wealth. You have all the same thing. You're eating the same food. You're drinking the same water. You're getting strip searched like everybody else. You're living in the same cell, and you've lost the same freedom that everybody else inside. And they're all there because we've made choices that have put us there. And your life changes so dramatically, but it's when you come home that things really start to you get a better understanding of the importance of what the journey is about and what life is about. because quite honestly, coming home is hard. I came back into a halfway house in Philadelphia, and I was challenged. I was challenged by the understanding why the biggest thing of my day was finding toilet paper to wet my butt. I was challenged by there were more drugs in my room and more people overdosing on K2 and other drugs in a halfway house setting than you find in some of the most challenging areas of Philadelphia. I was challenged by why it was so hard to get out of a halfway house, and getting that ticket to get out was like finding Willy Wonka's golden ticket. It was just it was really hard, and I pledged to myself when I was in the halfway house setting that I was going to do everything I could possible to make sure that we changed that when men and women came home, that they were given an opportunity. And, I'll be honest with you, I say this all the time too, is that, a lot of what I do is because of the color of my skin. Look, I'm a white Jewish man who was educated and lived a privileged life. And the reality for me is that I get to tell the story of the men and women that are Black and brown that I work with every single day who don't have that benefit. They don't have the luxury of going to school and going to college and being educated, and then those kinds of opportunities. So, I mean, we live in a world now where so much is happening with George Floyd and all these racial issues that are going up. But, people have to step up and take responsibility. And the first is understanding that white privilege exists across the country. And once you start talking about it, I've been working in this space since I've been home in 5 years. And I'll tell you something, I feel more comfortable walking through North Philadelphia in some of the challenging areas now with gun violence and everywhere else than I do anywhere else in the world. I live in town Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, we have a reentry program called Looking Forward Philadelphia, which is at Broad and Cecil B. Moore at 1526 Cecil B. Moore. And I get it. Most of my staff that we work with have lived experience, and we understand the journey of where you've been from. And quite honestly, whatever we can do to help people, but we have to understand, it's not just about getting a job. It's not just about putting somebody in a McDonald's or Burger King or fast food restaurant. It's about them understanding there's a career pathway. There's a better way that can direct you to a 401k and a nice living and a real career where, you get skill development. I was just reading this morning. There's an article in Forbes magazine came out, and it says that the literacy level in the United States is so ridiculously challenged that we lose $2.2 trillion a year because of lower literacy. Almost 153 million people in the country have low literacy levels. Right. And you know what? The reality of that number is that 3/4 of them, if not higher, are men and women that are Black and brown because they haven't had the ability and the resources and the tools and those things that you need. We have to ask the right questions. The right questions are, what do you need? And how can we support you? How can we get you? Quite frankly, if you asked me what I needed when I came home from prison, you know what I needed? I needed a SEPTA pass. Because or some tokens. I was walking from Broad and Lehigh to City Hall and CareerLink and other places to try and find a job, because I didn't have that money. I needed clothing. Most of my clothing was destroyed in a flood while I was away. I needed to know where I could get a decent meal inexpensively because I couldn't eat anything in the halfway house because it was so infested with whatever. Right. Those are the things that we need to start thinking about and understand that just because you find someone a job that maybe leads to a career, that everything else in their life doesn't go away. They don't lose their addiction issues. They don't lose challenges at home like homelessness and finding a decent place to lay their head at night. They don't lose the family issues that they have and needing somebody to talk to. Those are the kind of things that we have to embrace, and we have to understand that the whole picture of it. Too often we live in our little shelters, our little silos, and we say, okay, we're going to do some good work and we're going to get people to work. We're going to get people jobs. And then we forget about everything else that goes on. So when we work with people, it's for their lifetime. It's for as long as you need support.
It's amazing that you talk about, what's needed and people, quite frankly, listening, because that becomes the bigger space, especially in the legislative arena. We deal with funding for programs, and we talk about funding as almost as if it is a catch-all. The moment we cut the check, all the solutions go away, and the media brands it in that way in many ways, and I think that's erroneous on our end. But we miss the narrative of we have to walk a person towards their progress. Walk with them, not behind them. Don't just push them off the cliff and hope that they fly. Fly with them and show them the way to actually navigate.
Absolutely. It's a lot of hand holding. It's understanding what the nuances are and the challenges. You know, we often try to get somebody to a job and then we realize that they don't have a car or transportation to get there, or they're going to a job in the middle of the night and SEPTA buses don't even run where they're going. The challenges and that hand holding and that guidance is all part of it. Peer mentorship is a big component of it. Knowing that there's somebody there to talk to. I took somebody out last night for dinner, a guy that I've been working with, just for a decent meal, who's been in and out of prison 20 times in his young life. And I was like, man, what do we got to do? What can we do to help you? And he said, you know, I said, what do you like doing? He says, you know, I like writing poetry. I said, cool. I said, you know, let's see what we can do with that. Let's see if we can start getting you someplace that, you know, you can do some writing and go back to school. And he got his GED. Now he's looking at getting into some college. So we steered him towards a college program that he can tolerate, not something where you're thrown into the wolves and asked to fend for yourself. This is a program where, you know, there's a great partnership that JEVS has with Southern New Hampshire University. That's all project based. You're given projects and you work on the project and that's how you get your credits. Well, isn't that easy? And you can do it at home when you come home from work, and you can do it when your kids go to bed or on the weekend when you have some time. I mean, we have to meet people where they are and then try and give them the resources that they really need and understand that.
So let's talk about JEVS. You've mentioned it clearly. You are a figurehead in the space, and not just figurehead in the sense of one that people see, but you're leading the efforts through your experience and your impact. Thousands of individuals in the past 4.5 to 5 years that have encountered you have received help, resource, things of that nature. But for those who don't understand what JEVS is, what the mission is there, talk a little bit about that.
So I can tell you in one line, JEVS, their tagline is making hope happen. Just so simple, but it's such a diverse organization. So we have 2 methadone clinics, Act 1 and Act 2 in Philadelphia. We operate the Career Link at Suburban Station. We see almost 10,000 men and women through there every year that are unemployed and underemployed. We own Orleans Technical College in Northeast Philadelphia. We have the Choice is Yours diversion program for young people that get into some trouble. I oversee the contract on State Road for all the vocational training going on behind the walls of our county prisons. We have contracts with the Department of Corrections where we do workforce development. There's a home healthcare network. There are so many resources available through JEVS, but their ultimate mission is to meet people where they are and to provide them with those resources. And quite frankly, I was amazed when they came to see me. They said, you know, Jeff, we know that we have all these great programs and we're doing some great stuff in Philadelphia. We've been doing it for 70 years. But we need you. We need you to come in and break down the silos, because a lot of the men and women that we see that have these challenges also have criminal backgrounds. And we need to break down those silos. We need to go and we need to see those people that are having addiction issues. How many people have backgrounds that need support to navigate that background to get back to work? And that's been one of the greatest things about JEVS is that they've opened that door up so wide, and they've allowed me the opportunity to do that work, not only locally, but nationally. I sit on the Pennsylvania Reentry Council, and they recently passed a bill in Pennsylvania, Governor Wolf signed, where occupational licensing is changing now. In January, you can, you know, it was ridiculous to me that to be a barber in Pennsylvania, you couldn't get your license renewed because you had a felony or a background. And now all the licensing requirements in Pennsylvania are being relooked at. So there's not an automatic blanket preclusion for you if you want to get into a trade like that. And that's really what it's about. You know, I believe that I sit in the middle of the center of this bullseye where workforce development, re-entry, and employment, they all come together, and education. And we have to complete that circle. We have to educate people to give them the skill sets to get in those good jobs, and then get them to work, and then hold their hand and walk them through the process.
You know, and there are many stereotypes that exist when we talk about reentry. Many like to have a blanket narrative around what they consider the profile of reentry, and there really is no profile. Everyone has their own story. They have uniqueness in their own rights. Let's break down some of the myths that exist in this concept and process of reentry. If you could tell those who are watching right now, something from your heart that many feel in the reentry space, but need us to know, those who have not experienced it firsthand, what would that be?
Wow.
I'm sure there's a bunch of things.
Yeah. So no, it's kind of the simplest thing. There's a great line that Martin Luther King had said. He said, "In the end, we remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends."
Yeah.
And I live by that because, quite honestly, when I came home, and when most men and women come home from prison, one of the things that they really need is just an ear. They just need to know that you're there. Wow. And not talking about money. I'm not talking about giving them a home, not talking about giving them food. Just sit down and listen to them. Mm-hmm. And try and figure out, what lessons did you learn? Where are you going to go next? What's your game plan? What's your map? But I think it's those little things of just that reach out, just letting them know you're there. Quite honestly, I would have taken a smile or a handshake from some people when I came home, and that would have just made my day. So I think there's so much we can do in the community that really is, there's not a heavy lift. It's just the little things that matter. And we have a new appreciation for things. And when you come home from prison, your appreciation really is, for me, it's underwear that fits and sleeping in a decent bed and having a meal and making those choices of what you can eat. I tell a story often about one of the challenges for me being away was time, and time is a new perspective for me. I remember when I went to Canaan that I had a hard time looking at a calendar because 5 years is a long time for anybody. It's 5 birthdays, it's 5, holidays and things like that. And I have a daughter and missing her. And, but I went and bought 5 years worth of Q-tips when I got to Canaan from Commissar, and people thought I was crazy. And every day I used a Q-tip, so I knew I was coming home when I used up my Q-tips, and things like that. And those kind of stories, people they need to know that oftentimes when men and women go to prison, that the punishment that they inflict upon themselves is far worse than what society or what a judge has given them. And that is true for me. So for the men and women that are out there that are returning and coming home, that the first challenge is to forgive yourself. And then the second is to sit down and understand that, you have to take some self-responsibility and move forward and be thoughtful about where you're going to go, because your whole life's ahead of you. There's a great book by David Brooks called The Second Mountain. Yeah. And it's all about, you climb the first mountain in life and something sends you back down. Granted, no one's going to fall as far as I fell, but when you fall down, life isn't about the first climb. It's all about the second and what you do.
It's You've left me with so many gems to take, and I'm sure those who are watching feel that as well. One of the things that I feel in listening to your words, Jeff, is that you fell back in love with life. There are so many of us that live in a far worse prison mentally because we've gone through life living a life that was forced on us by, peer pressure or the expectations of parents and family. And we spend 20, 30 years in that space and fall totally out of love with life. And that affects relationships. It affects all different kinds of things. And so I'm looking at you as a free man, not just from a confinement perspective physically, but mentally as well. Am I correct in that assessment?
Man, you are so correct. I honestly, I don't think that I've ever been in my life I've ever been happier. And it's a lot of it is because when I came home from prison, I made a determination that it was going to be about finding that happiness. It was going to be about what makes me happy, not what makes my family happy, not what makes anyone else in the world happy, what's going to make me happy. And once you find it, then you start running with it. That train just starts moving and chugging. And now my train runs at one speed. It's fast. And that's because there's so much work to be done. And when we talk about reentry and both from Washington across the country, the work I do is national in scope. And I'm trying to make it a better place for everybody. And I'm willing to do that one person at a time, and sitting down with people in North Philadelphia, and South Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, wherever it is. I spent my this past Saturday at a church in North Philadelphia, and there were about 8 or 9 people there, and we're all talking reentry. And it's a community just wanted to know how, what can we do with our kids? What can we do with ourselves? How can we better ourselves? And And that's what it takes. It takes people getting out of their ivory towers and coming down in the streets and seeing what's needed to be done, and then not just talking about it, but doing it. Everybody talks a good game sometimes, but it's those agencies that really put their money where their mouth is and sit down, and that's how things get done.
You're spot on with that. How does one who's watching this episode support JEVS and the work that you're doing? I mean, clearly, many times coming out and lending a few hours of muscle is great. But I'm sure there are other ways as well that we can support organizations that are doing this really impactful and very much needed work in the space.
Yeah, there's tons of ways. So for our program, Looking Forward is based at right off Temple's campus at 1526 Cecil B. Moore. And you can reach us just at lookingforward@jevs.org. Or at 484-533-7002. So if you call us, then what's nice is we can actually, we'll reach out. It doesn't have to be you. It could be a friend, a loved one, a nephew, niece, whoever it is that might need some support or a career opportunity. And we've pivoted early on in COVID-19. So we've never shut down. We've been operational because men and women are coming home from prison more and more now. We need to be able to service them and support them. So that's one way. The other way is if you go on to PhiladelphiaReentryCoalition.org. It's an amazing site, PhiladelphiaReentryCoalition.org. It's 130 plus organizations in Philadelphia that are doing great work. You don't just got to go to Looking Forward. No, this is about all the people in the streets that are doing, from the faith-based organizations to the mental health and behavioral health centers to places like Sunday Breakfast that are providing shelter for people when they come home. Just go on there and you'll find all these resources. Pick up the phone, call them and say, hey, I got some time on my hand this weekend. What do you got going? What can you use? That's all it takes.
Jeff, I think the world is made better because you're in the space that you're in right now and on the mission that you have embarked on. And so I really appreciate you taking time out to talk to us today, but then also all that you're doing in the space. I hear you have a podcast as well. You have, I'm salivating at this microphone that you have in front of me. Right?
So it's actually a live radio show. I have a radio show called Looking Forward in Philadelphia, or Looking Forward Radio, and it's on WPPM 106.5. It airs every Wednesday. And we pivoted also. We're taping remotely because the studio has been closed, but still going out and broadcasting. And, we talk criminal justice. We talk about, what people need to know. Every week I have somebody, usually Lou Narvaez from Pennsylvania Probation and Parole is on, and he talks about what people need to know out on the streets. This is what we're looking at. This is how we can help you. These are the programs. So it's important that we start bridging some of those gaps that have existed for a long time. And then we have some success stories on and people talking real stuff. So it's great.
No, we love it. And we'll make sure that we promote it on all of our social media channels as well. And consider Heart of the City home for you, Jeff. If there's anything that we can do, anything that we can promote, we will.
Oh, that's awesome. It's a great show. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you. It's great having you. And so you've heard from Jeffrey Abramowitz, Executive Director over at JEVS, an amazing individual in his own right. His story is absolutely incredible. And more importantly, I'm excited about the work that he has done for thousands of others in the space. It's important that we have people that understand the issues, that quite frankly are not there for power, there for prestige, but are there to actually do the work. Jeffrey is one of those individuals, and JEV is one of those organizations too. Make sure that you support them as well. This has been an absolutely amazing show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Those who have commented, text, called, we appreciate all that you do. Here's what we need you to do. Subscribe today. Become a part of the HeartCity family. You'll receive updates, notifications, bonus content, and more. All you have to do is go to our YouTube channel, check out our footage, episodes, bonus content. I'm sure it will bless you as much as it blesses us being in this space. You can follow us on HeartCity online, Facebook, and Instagram. And as always, feel beautiful, look beautiful, and act beautiful. Why? Because you truly are beautiful. We'll see you next week.